Hello, everyone! Welcome to another Mysterious Galaxy virtual event. I am Nick, the Director of Events and Digital Marketer for the store. Today, we are back with a wonderful YA book and a sequel to one you may have already read. Of course, I am talking about Claire McFall. Hello, Claire!
Hello!
And in conversation, we have K.M. Robinson. Hello!
Hello!
For those of you who may be watching who aren't familiar, Claire McFall is a former English teacher whose first book, Ferryman, this one right here that we were talking, won the Scottish Children's Book Award, and it was long listed for both the Branford Boase, I hope I said that right, maybe not.
I'm not sure.
Award and the Carnegie Medal. Excellent. She's also the author of BLACK CAIRN POINT, published in the US as The Last Witness, which won inaugural Scottish Teenage Book Prize. K.M. Robinson is a social media educator and speaker who helps entrepreneurs build profitable businesses through smart social media marketing with easy content creation. She's been spotlighted by Facebook for her innovative work in the field and has appeared on CBS News nationally, NBC News nationally, Business News, lots of different outlets. My goodness, you've been featured a lot. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
But yes, today we are talking about the sequel to the Ferryman, Trespassers. This one, and I totally love that you kept in the theme, slightly color change. It looks like it's gone to evening time. For everyone who hasn't yet purchased your own copy of Trespassers, and maybe if you would like to get the Ferryman too, if you need to, there's a link below if you're watching this live. That'll take you to our website where not only can you get Claire's books, but you can also get KM's books too if you want to support more authors. Also, buying the books helps support Mysterious Galaxy to keep doing wonderful events like this. Lastly, if you have any questions that you want to ask Claire later half of the program, there's another link that says ask a question and you can pose your questions there. All right. I'm going to go ahead and leave it to Claire and KM for the rest of the event, but I'll see everyone later in the program.
Well, hey, everyone, we are so excited to see you this evening. If you do have questions, please drop those down below. We are going to be talking a little bit about Claire's books tonight, but we want to make sure we're answering your questions as well. So jump into our chat box or that question box down below. Claire, I am so excited to hang out with you again. I know we're talking about your sequel today. So you and I have actually had conversations about your first book in the series. Yes. Today we're talking all about the sequel. So what do we need to know about your books before we dive into today's conversation?
Okay, so Ferryman is the first book in the series, and it's based loosely on the Greek myth of Ferryman, which was Charon, who was the ferryman of Hades, who was the god of the underworld. And basically, when you died, you've heard of maybe putting pennies over your eyes, and that was so you could pay the ferryman, and he would ferry you across the river Styx and the rivers Acheron, which are the rivers of misery and pain, so you didn't really want to swim. And then you would go and live in the shadow of the gods. And if you didn't have the money, then your soul would just wander lonely and lost for the rest of eternity. So Ferryman follows a ferryman called Tristan, who is trapped in this kind of unending cycle of ferrying souls and just getting really disillusioned with his lot in life. And then he meets a soul called Dylan, who was in a tragic train accident. She's only 14 years old, and she's in this train accident and she's thrust into the afterlife. And she recognizes how tough a deal he's been given and works to try and help him escape from this cycle that he's in. So when we left Ferryman at the very end, it was on kind of a cliffhanger, because they were, I'm trying not to give away the entire book in case you haven't read it, and then too many spoilers. I've already told you that Dylan dies, so that's kind of a big one. But at the end of the book, they achieved something they've been working really hard to do in order to break him free of this cycle that he's stuck in, of just ferrying soul after soul and having no life of his own. Trespassers follows them on into the living world, and it's kind of got two different storyline strands. The first one follows Tristan and Dylan and the fact that they had to break the rules of the afterlife to achieve the thing they needed to do. And there's always consequences you don't foresee. Whenever you do something new that's breaking the mold, there's always stuff that's a consequence that you just couldn't have foreseen. So basically, their actions start to break down the fabric between the afterlife and the living world, which is bad. But there's also a second strand, which invites a couple of new characters. So Ferryman really is the story of Dylan and Tristan, and there's not a lot of other characters in it. It's quite an intense story. in Trespassers, we meet Susanna, who's another ferryman, and I saw that she's wearing called Jack. And it kind of comes from a saying that my mom always loves to say, and she'll go, "Somebody always sees you," in her very Scottish accent. And basically, if you truant school, or if you litter, or you do something a bit naughty, there's always somebody that you think you've gotten away with it. Someone always sees, and she sees what they've done and wants to do the same thing, because why wouldn't you? And so the worry is, well, if you start a wave, like one person can do something and, you know, the world survives. But if we start a wave of it, if it starts becoming a movement, then it becomes a real problem. So it kind of follows these two couples as they try and navigate the consequences of Dylan and Tristan's rule break in book 1.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you've introduced this new concept of someone is always watching. And I like that you kind of spin it off into seeing both of those perspectives, or watching both of those couples go through this story and see what happens when people are actually paying attention and then following people's directions. So I kind of love that you're playing into the consequences of their actions in the second book. Now,
see, listen to my mother.
No, that's the thing though, right? Moms always know. They've got the great advice and it goes right into our novels. Or that too. Oh, goodness. So if you are here joining us live, we would love to hear from you. Go ahead and jump into our chat box. Drop your questions, drop your comments. We want to make sure we are responding and answering to you as well. Claire, before we dive into too much more of the conversation, I want to see that pretty cover again. So let's hold up your book. Let's talk about what we need to know. Okay, explain your cover to us.
So we obviously have Tristan and Dylan, and this is them now in Glasgow. If you can kind of see, and I'm super excited about this because it's a Scottish book. I'm a Scottish person. You don't get that much young adult Scottish fiction coming out beyond Scotland. So I'm super excited. So this here is the Glasgow tenements, which I'm really super excited to see. And I love the change of color scheme, because the first FERRYMAN is quite kind of, it's reflecting the wasteland, which is the kind of Scottish wilderness. So it's lots of greens and browns. This one is a much more urban book. And so it's got sort of loads of pinks in it, loads of grays. And I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. I love it. And obviously you've got the two of them intertwined because this is a bit of a love story. So there's still a little bit of canoodling. And I love her hair too. I used to have hair like that before I cut it. And you've got beautiful, long, gorgeous hair. I miss that floofing everywhere. Yes, you see, you could do this cover.
I could. Well, we might just have to recreate that. I'm a big fan of Yep, I'm a big fan of doing all the pretty photos for Bookstagram. For those of you who do not know me yet, I am a multi-time best-selling author, and I've got all the pretty pictures over on my Instagram. So if you guys are interested, perhaps we should make it a little bit of a challenge. If you are here with us live and you are loving the new cover, maybe you should give us your interpretation of this on your Instagram and make sure you are tagging Claire in that. Claire, where can people find you on social media in order to tag you in those photos?
So I am at Claire McFall author on Instagram. I am at McFall_Claire on Twitter. But if you put in Claire McFall, you'll see my face. It's there. My face is there. And I'm also on www.clairemcfall.co.uk because I'm a funny Scottish person. And someone stole clairemcfall.com. Can you believe it? Oh. So I'm still on my .co.uk. Yes, I was outraged. I was quite frankly outraged. I am also on Facebook, and if you put in Claire McFall, again, you'll see the face, but I believe it's facebook.com/Claire McFall author.
You know what's so funny is I have a very popular first and last name, and so when I started my businesses, the website was taken, and thus my initials were born. So that's how it all came about. But we want to make sure that if you are jumping into our fun little challenge here today, you are tagging Claire and all of the rest of us as well, because we kind of want to see what you come up with. If you've got the fabulous hair or the colors or just the pretty book pictures, we would love to hear from you in the next couple of days or weeks as you are recreating this cover or doing something special over on your Instagram and other socials as well. So Claire, let's talk a little bit about the fact that this book is not just a book. This book is being turned into a movie. All about it. So I know this was a really fun process for you. Tell me a little bit about how you started out with this and then all of a sudden exploded and became somebody who's getting her very own movie.
Yes, so it's a funny little tale because I really did start, as someone who was writing her book after school in my little damp flat in the Scottish borders. And I didn't really expect the book to become published, first of all. And then I didn't expect it to win the Scottish Children's Book Awards. I didn't expect it to be nominated for the, the whole thing was unexpected. And I was quite delighted to have my book out in the world, for it to be shortlisted for a couple of things. And I thought, that's amazing. This book has done so wonderfully. And then I got this email, and I remember I was on holiday in Colorado. I got an email from my agent, and the email just said, how would you like to be published in Chinese? And I thought, I'd love to be published in Chinese. Thank you very much. And really what I was expecting is, you get a teeny advance for foreign deals. And I thought, I'll get to see my name on a foreign cover. And then a couple of people somewhere in a foreign country that I've never been to might read my story. And how amazing is that? And I was extremely happy with that situation, and I didn't think it was going to go any further. And I remember, and I just got the Facebook memory today, actually, it was 7 years ago today, and China has just re-released the series with a whole new set of covers, because 7 is a lucky number. So it was 7 years ago today. I was in Malay, which is a tiny little town on the coast of Scotland, on my holidays, my school holidays. And I thought, I'll just look and see if I can find it on the internet in China. That was my whole challenge to myself. Can I find it on the, because you have to search in Chinese. And I cannot speak or read Chinese or write Chinese. So I did some Google translating, and I managed to find it on two of the biggest websites for sales in China are Jingdong and Dangdang. And I managed to find it on Dangdang. I was like, oh, there it is. There's my cover. There's my book. There's my name in Chinese. And I was just looking at it, and then I saw it's got 48,000 reviews. How can I have 48,000 reviews? That's a bit bananas. And it had come out in June, and this was October. And so I phoned my agent. I was like, it seems to be going quite well. I don't quite know what's happening here. And so he said, well, okay, calm down. We don't know what's going on yet. Let me investigate. So he goes off to investigate, and I keep Googling, Google, seeing what I can find out. And we both found this website called Open Book, which is China's book chart. And they don't really have a young adult chart. They have a children's chart and an adult chart. And so FERRYMAN was categorized as adult. And so we're like, right, okay, so it's not in the top 10, so it can't be going bananas. It's okay. We'll go and ask the publisher and see what we get back. And so a week later, I check it again, because now I'm obsessed with checking, seeing what I can find out. And there is on the Open Book chart at number 5 for adult and young adult fiction for the whole of China. And I was kind of flabbergasted, and it stayed in their top 10 for 18 months, and it stayed in the top 30 for 3 years, which was just boom. During that time, Trespassers and the final book in the trilogy, Outcasts, were born, and they came out, and they were really popular too. And so it just sort of, the popularity in that one country just shut off deals in other little places. And we had kind of sold the film rights to Chinese publishers multiple times. In fact, one time I actually signed the contract, and we shook hands and everything. And I was like, yes, it's going to be a film in China. And then for one reason or another, all of these fell through, which is really common to happen with film and TV rights. Is you get yourself all excited, you start dreaming about the red carpet, and then the whole deal just falls flat. So I was getting a little bit demoralized. And I remember I was in my classroom, I was lesson planning, and my agent called. So I answered the phone again, and he starts telling me about this film deal. And I'm kind of like, okay, right, And I'm kind of I just was trying not to get myself excited, because it happened so many times. I've been like, oh, and then bleh. So I'm trying not to get too excited. And then he kind of throws the words legendary in. And I was like, what? Rewind. Did you say? And he was like, yes, Legendary would like to buy the rights for the book. And obviously, I knew who Legendary were. Legendary are the Godzilla movies, The Dark Knight, all those really cool movies. Dune is Legendary. And so I thought, oh, I know who they are. That's a huge American company. And so I got super excited at that point. And it happened really quite quickly. That was at the end of November. And by the new year, we had the deal signed and everything. And then Kelly Marcel signed on as the script writer. And I got to have conversations with Hollywood producers and with a Hollywood script writer, which was just bananas to me in my little house in the Scottish borders. And I got to see the script, which is a scary, scary moment, because your book is your baby. And I've written 26 books now. They've not all been published, but I've written 26 books. But FERRYMAN was the first thing I ever wrote. So it's my little baby. And so you're sort of thinking, what are they going to do to it? So it's kind of a nerve-wracking moment, but I was super pleased with what she did. And then she decided that she would like that to be her directorial debut. So she signed on to direct it as well. And more recently, Louis Partridge, who played Lord Tewkesbury in Enola Holmes, and also is in Danny Boyle's Sex Pistols thing as the lead Sex Pistol, whose name escapes me for this very second. But yeah, a real up-and-comer. He signed on to play the role of Tristan, which I can absolutely see. I looked him up as soon as they gave me the name. I thought, I've seen Enola Holmes, but let's have a look. This is the most odd thing to fixate on, but he has the most perfect eyebrows. for the job. Now, I don't know why I'm set on the eyebrows, but I was just like, yes, those are the eyebrows. And so now we are on a hunt for a Dylan. And what I'm really hoping is you get something called the green light when they have all the pieces of the puzzle in place and they start filming. And that's what every author hopes will happen to their project. And we are right before the line. And so I'm waiting extremely impatiently to see if we get there. It was a very long answer.
Oh, I'm so excited. And we love the behind the scenes of how books are adapted into movies and screenplays and television shows. So we love this insider look at how the process is working for you. And if you're joining us live, there are links down below, because at this point, if you are not completely enraptured by Claire's story, we don't know what you're doing. Get down there and make sure you're grabbing your copy right now, because this is such a fun experience. Not only do you get to read this story right now, but you get to go on the journey with Claire as we are going into movie production. So you get to see all the behind the scenes as it's happening. So there's never been a better time to jump into Claire's series than right now. So Claire, let's talk a little bit more about your sequel. How did you come up with this concept? I know it came from an idea that your mother gave you as she was giving you advice, but what made you decide to go in this particular direction?
Do you know, I'd left it deliberately open on the cliffhanger. And like I said, it was the first book that I ever wrote. And I thought, it's not finished. I know it's not finished, but I don't know where else to go. I don't know what the next step is. So I went away and I wrote loads of other books. I think I wrote probably another 6 books. The Last Witness, which is one of the books I have out in the US. That was one of the books that I wrote. I also wrote a book called Bomb Maker, which was released in the UK, and a couple of others. And this whole time at the back of my head, I'm like, this story is not finished. There's a sequel, but I just literally didn't know what it was going to be. And I was driving back from the beach one day, and I remember it was pouring and the windscreen wipers were going 10 to the dozen. And I kind of went, oh, I know. And then it was the idea of, your mother always sees you. And it is true. Someone always catches you, even when you think you've gotten away with something. Someone always catches you. And the question is going to be, are you going to get in trouble for it? But also, are they going to copy you? And in this case, it's somebody who wants to copy them, and they think they've gotten away with it. They don't yet know that there's going to be consequences in the living world. They think that they are, off and able to be free now. But also they have no idea that someone else is following in their footsteps, and that someone is going to do the same tiny bits of damage that they haven't yet discovered in their own path. And so what we're doing is we're perforating all these tiny holes between reality and the afterlife. And that's, if you read Ferryman, you know that these are these awful monsters called wraiths. So basically you have to cross something called the wasteland. We have the living world over here, we have the afterlife over here, and in between is this kind of journey that you take in order to just reevaluate yourself, get your head into the mind space of, okay, my body is gone, I am a soul, this is what the world is, this is the next part. And just as like a transformation space. It's also an extremely dangerous space because it's filled with these creatures. And the creature idea came from, and this is very old now, I'm aware, but the movie Ghost with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze. And if you're a little younger, you might just know it from the pottery scene with the "Oh my love," that bit, and it's very romantic. And there's a moment in there where this awful character, Carl, is killed, kind of a window breaks, it's all his fault, the window breaks and gets him in the neck. And instead of the bright lights, or instead of even him becoming ghost like Patrick Swayze, you just hear this, and if you watch it now, it's not the greatest CGI. When I was 10 years old and watching it for the first time, I was absolutely terrified because these things just came up and clawed him and pulled him down into the ground. If you watch it now, it looks a little bit like someone took a Sharpie and drew them on the screen, which isn't quite as convincing. But in the 90s, this was top-notch digital stuff. And so these creatures are kind of based on that, and how much they frightened me that they could sort of, these insubstantial things that you can't grab, but they can grab you. So there's not really any way to fight, and they sort of pull you down. And if they manage to do that, you become one of them. So all these tiny holes that are being perforated is leaving little tiny gaps for these creatures to come through. And then obviously that's bad.
That is bad. That's a bad thing. We're getting lots of comments saying the scene is iconic and definitely scared people as children. So we've got a lot of people relating right now. So now that we've got some danger inside of this story, how terrified do we need to be? Scale of 1 to 10. Should we be really scared of this book?
I mean, there's very creepy moments. I would say there's moments that are, a 7, but then it's a young adult book, so it's not, Stephen King scary. I think, I mean, I would be scared, but that's just because I've really got these creatures in my head. So I hope if you read, if you've read Ferryman and you've kind of seen them in action, then you understand what they can do. So even just the threat of them before we get to see them in the book, and we do get to see them in Trespassers, is kind of that, those things. So that's what I'm hoping is a little bit of tension building, because you know what they are and you know what they can do. But what we don't know is what can they do to you in the living world.
Ooh, fair question. I love that you are taking the world that you created and kind of showing us the opposite side of it in this sequel. And I really like that you've kind of almost surprised yourself in what you're writing as well, because you didn't know what you were going to do going into this story. So what was one thing about this sequel that surprised you that you did not see coming?
I think it was the simple joy of, because I took someone who'd never actually been in the living world and I put him in it. And he's already at the sort of late teenage, I guess you would say, looks wise, maybe 17, 18. He's hundreds of years old from the wasteland, but he has all the memories of these characters in his head. So he knows lots about the living world, but he's never actually been there. And so what I found really sweet that I didn't expect to find sweet about the story was taking someone who's only ever seen something, had it in their head, and giving it to them to hold. Like, if you imagine someone's seen hundreds of pictures of animals their whole life, but they've never gotten to go to a zoo or on safari. And then it's presented to them and they can see it and they can feel the heat and they can smell the stink of animals and they can touch it if they're very brave and don't want their hand bitten off by a lion. But, the difference between this flat image and then the reality. And I really enjoyed thinking, okay, you're going to get a chocolate digestive, which is a cookie in the UK. You're going to get a chocolate digestive for the first time. What is that like if you're the age of, everyone's had them from when they were a small child in my country. Imagine what it would like to just give someone it as an adult, show them the actual TV as an adult, music pounding around your head as an adult, and you've never had that experience before. It was just really fun to imagine myself in that bit, and it was a joyous bit amongst the kind of danger and the tension. It was just something that could be nice, and I like that.
I love that, because it almost gives the reader the opportunity to kind of relive things from their childhood, things that we experienced when we were young and maybe didn't quite understand the full concept of understanding what a cookie is or what a television is. And so we get to reimagine this through the eyes of your character. So I love that you've implemented that into your writing as well. Now, friends, if you are joining us live, we want to make sure we're getting your questions answered. There's a question button down below. So hit that now. Start dropping your questions. We're going to start answering those in a couple of minutes, but we don't want to miss anything. So now is your time. Get down there. Hit the question button, make sure you're over in our chat box and letting us know what we should be talking about while we're here hanging out today. Now, Claire, you mentioned you've got a lot of books and a lot of really cool stories that we need to know about. So give us a little bit of an overview about the things that you write.
So I write young adult and I stick in that realm, but I don't like to stick to one genre within that. And it's mostly because I don't like to, this is a terrible thing to confess and it's a terrible way to write and I don't recommend it at all, but I don't like to plan what I'm going to write. I don't like to think, well, okay, I would like to write a story about dragons now, so I'm going to come up with a story about dragons. I sort of walk around in a slightly panicked daze. It gets more panicked as the longer it goes on, and I wait for something to slap me around the face and say, you will write me. And so that can be inspired by anything. Ferryman was inspired by a dream, which I hate to tell people because it sounds horribly cliched. I had a dream, but I really did. I had a dream of being on a really crowded train and I woke up and the train was empty except for me. And I kind of was pondering it as I was driving to work the next day. And I don't know what it is about my mindset, but I thought, well, if you're the only one that's there, something bad has probably happened and it's to you, it's not to everyone else. It's definitely to you and you're probably dead. And I don't know quite why my mind laid that leap, but that's how Ferryman started to be born. Bomb Maker, which was my second book, which came out in the UK, which you can get on, you can import in, but it's not published in the US, as it were. And it was inspired by a film, which when I go out and talk to school children about this, they're always like, well, you can't do that. That's plagiarism. And I try and explain. So what I did was I watched this film called Children of Men, which is a really cool film where the premise is everybody stopped having babies. No one can have babies. And so the last babies born are the last of humanity. So it's the end of the world, but really slowly. Nothing's really changed, but the end is there. And so in the film, society is kind of clinging on by its fingertips. There's lots of terrorism going on because all the religious groups are trying to, say, I'm right, it's the end of times, you have to come over here. And there's loads of pollution and rubbish because who cares? It's the end of the world. And I really like that setting of just a London clinging on by its fingertips to civilization. And so I kind of created a political mishap, which was really similar to what happened when the UK left the EU, weirdly, and I made my setting that and put my own characters in it. But the film inspired just the feeling of that world. And then when I wrote The Last Witness, it was inspired by a camping trip. So if you read The Last Witness and you see lots of little details, like when the boyfriend made his girlfriend go and flirt to get a jump for the broken down car, that happened. Mm-hmm. The stinky fish in the car park, that happened. The getting out of the car and looking around the empty beach and thinking, oh my gosh, there's no one for miles, we're all going to die. That was in my head. And that's why I thought this will make an excellent horror. So I get ideas from so many different places and they just tell me what the story should be. So I think because of that, the books that I write are really eclectic. I would hope they're all within the young adult genre, but they all have different things. So there's some contemporary fiction, there's some dystopian fiction, there's some other world fantasy, there's some real world fantasy. So hopefully there's a little bit for everybody.
I love that. And if you are interested, we are dropping links into our chat box. We also have them linked down below on the page. So make sure you're getting your hands on copies of these, putting them on your wish list. Christmas is coming, which now means you have a perfect opportunity to create that wish list of books for yourself to give out to friends and family and to gift to your book besties as the holidays are coming up. So start keeping those things in mind as we're moving forward into the holiday season. And Claire, I want to jump in because we've got some really good questions coming in from our audience. Victoria wants to know, was there anything that got cut that you wished had made it into your first edition?
Oh, let me think. Now, we didn't have a cut in the first book, but we did have a major addition. So what happened was, if you read Ferryman, there's a moment about 2/3 of the way through where there's massive betrayal. And I thought, that's it. That's the end of the book. It's anticlimactic. They'll hate it. It's perfect. And so that was where I was going to end the story. And I thought it was brilliant. And the publisher was like, no, it does not end there. And this was a Friday night and they wanted to get the book on the Monday. So they were like, go and write us a different ending. We would like to see what you envisage. And I think they were thinking it would be like an extra chapter, maybe 2 chapters. It ended up being a 3rd act of the book that was 30,000 words. So everything from this big moment of betrayal was constructed in one massive, horrendous weekend. And at the time, I was a little bit miffed because I thought, oh, my brilliant ending's gone. But actually now looking back on it, I'm like, no, that was much better. It was a terrible ending. And I think the reason that I had stopped where I stopped is that I was too chicken to finish it because it went into the afterlife, and then you're dealing with issues of, well, people have ideas from religions, and so that was a little more tiptoey ground for me, and so I chickened out, and my publisher kind of went, no, that's not acceptable. Interestingly, The Last Witness almost had something cut, and I had to fight like crazy to keep it. So if you read The Last Witness, there's a shocking ending. Okay, you get to the ending and you're supposed to think, what? I'm not going to obviously tell you what it is, but my publisher didn't like the ending and they thought, we think that's too harsh, we think that's too scary, we would like you to change it. And I said no, and they said yes, and I said no again. and we had this back and forth that went on for ages. And this is a really funny true story, but what actually saved me was I was pregnant at the time. I was very pregnant at the time, and I had preeclampsia, which is it's quite a dangerous condition. Basically, your body starts turning against yourself and you have to have the baby now. So they were emergency inducing me at 9 a.m. the next day. This was 10:30 at night. So I basically emailed my editor and said, I'm being emergency induced. This is the ending. I'm going now. Goodbye. And I got my ending. It worked. But it's a tricky thing because you're in a relationship with the publisher. You really want to have a positive relationship with the publisher, but you also, the book has your name on it. So you want it to be the story that you want it to be. And you have to have this delicate balance of compromise, because there's always times when they're going to suggest a change and you're going to think, oh, I'm not really sure I like that. But you do it because you can see it's better for the book. Sometimes they suggest a change and you think, this isn't better for the book. This isn't the book I want to write, and you have to make a stand. But it's how you can convey that in a way that is kind and doesn't break down the relationship. Having a baby works really well, by the way. You're just
yeah. Yes, I feel like that is a good life lesson to take away if you are an aspiring author or a published author. Just keep that in mind for future reference. And we're getting a lot of love for baby in the comments as well. So well done, baby. Well done.
He did a good job.
He was working hard for his mama even before. Yes, we love a good baby. And speaking of fantastic side characters in your life, let's talk about your favorite side character inside of your story. Do you have a favorite best friend side character?
My favorite my favorite characters in all of my books are always the slightly naughty boys. I really do like a bit of a bad boy character. And in Ferryman, there isn't really a bad boy character because Tristan is my hero. And, you know, he's the good boy that we all want. But in Trespassers, there's the bad boy that we always kind of look at and think, no, don't, not that one, don't, but ooh. And so Jack is my little bit of rough, quite bad boy character who is just doing, honestly, he's not a bad guy. I'll sell this boy to you. He's a bit rough, he's a bit violent, he's a bit angry, he's very angry actually, but he's doing the best that he can within the world that he is. And the more you get to see of him, the more you understand what's led him to be this kind of tough, protective character, because he is just protecting his inner core, the more that you think maybe he's not so bad, but he also is a little bit of bad boy. So Jack is my little side crush, who's probably not the most appropriate boyfriend material, but you know. Can't listen to your mother all the time.
Yes. You know, it's so funny because I have a Jack Frost retelling and he's definitely the good boy, but we kind of learn maybe not so much. So I feel like our Jacks are opposite and I love it. But that also speaks so highly of who you and I are as people. You love your bad boys and I love my good boys. So join us in the comments and let us know, are you team good guy or team bad boy? In the comments, we're paying attention to this one. Let us know. We're getting lots of love over in the comments. Make sure you guys keep it up. We love, we're getting the shout outs for the bad boys. Okay, Victoria, we see you. We see you. Somebody please join me over here on Team. We're going to have a full out live stream on that one day and we'll just come let you vote and do all the fun things. Stick around. We're going to have lots of fun with that one. And Claire, we do have a question in our comments all about your research for this series. So we know we've got a lot going on inside of this tale. What did you do to prepare to write it?
Oh, it's a terrible answer. Very little. I'm not a big plotter, and I didn't intend to go out and write a book about Greek mythology. And I think probably if I'd come at it from that angle, I would have done a lot more research. What kind of came at me was the storyline, and then I realized this is the Ferryman storyline. And so I already knew lots of bits. And that's what I think is really nice about mythology is it's imbued in your culture, even if you don't know it's there. So if I ask people about their ideas about death, or if I ask people about their ideas about cairns and castles and tombs and older places within their landscape, everybody has got things that they can pick out. And interestingly, we have the same sorts of mythologies across different cultures. So in China, where Ferryman was really popular, they have two creatures called the black and white impermanents, who are actually really creepy. There's these kind of long-fingered kind of ghosts that creep in, but they do the similar sort of death thing. They come in and they steal their soul. And then obviously Hades had his Charon, and then we've got the idea of death with the scythe, and you've got the character in the chiropractic movies and things. And so it's really interesting to me how we have different bits that come in from a culture, and we just know them for, picking them up here, there, and everywhere. So I took what I knew, I put it in the story that I wanted to tell. I do occasionally do some research. I have an archaeologist for a husband. So if you ever read The Last Witness, or Black Cairn Point as it's called in the UK, the boyfriend, the cheeky boyfriend who sends me off to flirt to try and get a jump for the car, is now the husband, and he has PhD in archaeology. So he's my technical expert. So sometimes I just phone him up at work and I'm like, so 17th century Scotland, what would they have done if they wanted to execute someone? And he's just like, why? Don't ask questions. I'm in the middle of a chapter. Don't ask questions. So he's wonderful. And if you read The Last Witness and you get the bit about the Roman sacrifice that happens, that all came from my lovely husband, who's like, well, okay, let me give you the basics.
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. And we love a helpful husband. We're over here in our comments with quotes to beat. So go ahead, keep it up, guys. We love good quotes. Drop those in the comments for us. Corinne is in our comments saying she likes the Sour Patch Kid kind of bad boy. First they're sour, then they're sweet. About. And speaking of Corinne would like to know, do your students know that you're such a successful author?
They do. So it started off when I was in Les Mexico High School, and give my little tiny schools out a shout. And that was actually my old high school, and I was an English teacher there. And so they heard about Miss having a book deal, and then I left to go to a different high school before it came out. So it was really nice. As a couple of years later, I was able to go back to that high school and do a talk there. And they were just like, yeah, you were a teacher here, and you were a pupil here. And that's really cool because it's a teeny tiny school in the middle of nowhere in Scotland. In Peebles High School, which is where I moved to. And then the books started to come out, and where we won the Children's Book Awards and the Teenage Book Prize. And so the kids were starting to get an idea of, oh, okay, you're that woman that writes those books. That was my fame. You're that woman that writes those books. And I was just like, yes, that's me. But I've recently gone back to teaching. I took a break. I had 2 kids and took a break. And I just started teaching again this August. And I'm teaching some middle schoolers in Colorado. And they were super impressed. And I told them and I showed them the books, and they were like, oh, that's so cool. And they had loads of questions. They also were like, why are you teaching if you sold so many books? And then we had to have a discussion about agents and taxation and publisher and how much an author actually makes from a copy. And that was a little more of a depressing conversation for them.
We love a good educational moment, though. I am also a former teacher, but I actually walked away from teaching before my books were published. So I didn't have to have that conversation, but I love that they had to have this little learning opportunity about what actually looks like. And for those of you who have questions, we've been in this game a long time. Feel free to drop those down below. Now, Claire, we do have a question about what is something that you wish you could experience for the first time again?
Oh, do you know my favorite moment? And it's a really small moment, but it was just so wonderful. Was when my very first publisher for the very first book, so FERRYMAN, was coming out in the UK with Templar Fiction, was when I got the cover sent through as a PDF. And there was someone's visualization of my book, and there was my name on the cover. And it was just this magical moment because you do all this work. So I didn't really know how the industry worked when I first met. So I didn't know how to get an agent, and I did some Googling, and I worked out how to get an agent, and that took an age. And then he got me a book deal, and it was, I didn't know anything about book deals. So I was taking everything on trust with him. And then you do your development edit, and then you do your copyright edit, and then you do your final proofs edit. And there's all these little steps that are all kind of quite hard going, and they're not really magical. They're kind of hard work that you need to do. And at the time when you're editing, sometimes I feel like I'm destroying it, because I think the trouble with a novel is you change something over here, and then you have to chase it and cut bits and scalpel bits and stitch bits all over the place. And so it's a lot of hard work. And you can't really, but I think by the time you finish that, you're so close to the manuscript, you can't see the book anymore. You've kind of lost the joy of it. So the cover came in, and it was kind of this moment of, this is really going to be a book. And I did the saddest thing. It's really geeky. I printed it out on my color printer, and I wrapped it around a friend's VHS, as we're going back a decade now. And I posed in front of the mirror of me and my book. This is me in my book. This is my book. I wrote this book. This is me. It's really, really quite tragic. But it was just a sweet moment of, this is really going to be a book on the shelves that people can buy. I'm going to be an author. And it was just a wow moment that was so early on in the journey, but it sticks out in my mind still.
See, you say it's a sad moment, but you're talking to the woman who prints out all her book covers so you can hold them up. This is what we do, by the way, aspiring authors. Once you have a book cover ready to go, print it out, have it there so you can hold it up in social media and feel that real, almost real book baby in your hands. We all do this. It's like a passage to become an author. It's just one of those things. We are coming up to the end of our time. We've got a couple questions left to answer, but we want to make sure we're not missing anything. So now is your final call. Get down in my question box, drop anything else we need to answer. Make sure you're hanging out with us over in the chat box. We're going to wrap up in the next couple of minutes, but we want to make sure we cover everything you need to know. And hey, if you did not grab your copies of Claire's books yet, they are linked in our chat box. They're linked down below on the page. Now is the time. You do not want to miss out on this one. What were some of your favorite and worst parts of writing, Claire?
My favorite part of writing is always the same part. And so I said before that I like to get smacked by an idea and it's like, go and write this now. And so there's this outpouring of the story. And it's usually maybe the first 10, 20, 30,000 words, if I'm really lucky, just comes flooding out. And I don't have to plot. I don't have to plan. I don't have to think. There's just, when I write, I don't really think about the words. There's this tiny voice at the back of my head that just starts speaking. And I just try and keep up and do the best I can. And so there's just this new world that just floods out of me in a big rush. And it's this joy of discovering, you know, when you watch, like, if you read a new book and you love it, or you watch a new TV series and you just get lost in it. And it's that feeling of getting lost in the story and you just feel it so fully. And then my worst moment is about the 90% mark, when you're writing the first draft and you just think, why isn't it over? Why isn't it over? And you committed to it now. You have to see it through. But also, because I'm a pantser and not a plotter, which again, I do not recommend, sometimes the ending is not, we're not really where the ending needs to be. And I know we're at the 90% word count mark, but the ending is way over there and I'm still over here and I have to finagle some way to get over there. And I know that everything I write is probably going to change in the edit. So it's this whole, this is pointless, but I still have to do it so that I can give it to my agent or to my editor, and then they can hack at it and make me go back and write a proper ending. But by that point, I'm just so tired. I just want it to go away for a little while. And I think other writers possibly just stop there and take a break and go away and then come back to it. I can't. I have to finish. I have to go over the finish line and then I throw it at my agent. And my agent tells me I'm like his only writer who gives him first drafts to go and edit. It's like, you know, everyone else works on them until they're in a state to show to me. And I'm like, well, I pay you. I give you money.
There you go.
For me. No regrets, no repentance over here whatsoever. Here you are, Ben. Edit my book.
Got it. Listen, he signed up for this. He knew going into it, this is what it was going to be like. So,
and he's had me for 11 years now, so he cannot say he does not know.
And let's look at how well you've done for him too. Movie deals, everything. I feel like you've done your part.
Yes, just get on with it, man.
And speaking of the fact that editors and agents and all these fabulous people do work with other authors and other writers and other people who are giving them their books, we want to talk a little bit about some influences on your writing style. So Claire, what are some of the books and authors that have helped influence your writing?
Oh, interestingly, the book that you sometimes ask, which was the book that you wish you'd read? And it was a really small book and it was called Knife Edge. And it was about a bad boy who, of course it's about a bad boy. It's set in Dundee. And it just had this gritty feel. And it just made me think, oh, I want to write like that. And it was such a good book. But the book that really made me want to take up writing, the book that made me write a novel, was Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses, which is now a 6-book series, I think. When I read it at first, it was a 4-book series. And it's the most wonderful, wonderful series. It's basically making you take a fresh look at racism. So in the book, the Black community is very privileged and occupies all the political power and that sort of thing. And the white community is really repressed and is in poor education and things. And so we've got a white character called Callum, and I love the name Callum. It's just a gorgeous Scottish name. And a black girl called Seppi, who's very privileged. Her dad is a politician. And they are friends. And then, of course, they become more than friends. And nobody likes this at all, except for the two of them. And it gets really real, is what I like about it. It doesn't make it some floaty love story about defying the odds. It really takes, if you try to do this in this society, these are the challenges and these are the realistic consequences you're going to have to face. And the ending of the first book is just absolutely heartbreaking. But it goes on for 3 more books, following the other characters and bringing new people in. And it's just why I like it so much is it shows you the slow change in society as acceptance starts to grow a little bit and as things start to get a little better. And it's just really beautifully done. So when I'm writing a trilogy, which Ferryman is trilogy, actually I'm working on a prequel, so there will be 4 books by the end of it. And I've written a couple of other duologies and one trilogy that's unpublished. It's this idea of, okay, don't just think about the individual stories. What she really taught me was see the world from beginning, middle, and end, which as a pantser is a really hard thing to do. But looking back, I think it's winged it reasonably well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love that you and I are both very focused on the consequences of actions. I love that we're both drawn into making sure that stories that we both read and write have those realistic consequences inside of whatever's happening in the stories, because we know so often things could end on a little bit of a fluffier note. And I love when a story ends on something a little more realistic. So I love that that really influenced what you were doing and spoke to you as you were reading those stories. But speaking of consequences, I do have one final question for you before we let everybody know where they can find you. And it's all about consequences, Claire. This is a fun one. What are the consequences to reading Trespassers?
You want to read Outcasts. I really hope. So Outcasts is coming out in 2023, and it is the finale. And so we leave Trespassers on another cliffhanger, because I do love to do that. And basically, we have to see how there's got to be a new norm. There's got to be a new world. We have to make it right enough that things can continue, because within Trespassers, things are still swirling and up in the air, and the characters end their narrative arc in a satisfying place, but the world doesn't end it. So Outcast is going to really pull it all together. And as you were just saying, realistic consequences. There's some sacrifice that has to happen within Outcast, which was actually, as a new parent, to me, really, really tough to write. And I'm not going to tell you any more about it. When you get to Outcast, you might see. But in my new, position as a mature lady with children and things like that, it was heartbreaking, and really, because I understood what I was writing in a way that I couldn't have before I'd had children. So that's a not spoiler of what might be in the future.
I love it. And speaking of the future, we want to make sure that everybody can connect with both of us in the future. So if you want to come hang out with me, I would love for you to come join me. I've got 1,000,001 books for you to come read, and you can hang out with me at kmrobinsonbooks.com and at KM Robinson Life on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, and over at YouTube at KM Robinson Books. I've got tons of retellings, dystopian, sci-fi, fantasy, mermaid, steampunk, cyberpunk, the works, and I've even got some new adult thrillers and mysteries coming soon. So I'm very excited for you guys to come reach out. I would love to hear from you. Come chat with me. I chat with everybody who talks to me, and I know Claire does as well. Claire, where can everybody find you online?
Yes, you can find me at www.clairemcfall.co.uk. You can find me on Twitter at @McFall_Claire, or if you just put in Claire McFall, I will pop up with my face. Facebook is facebook.com//Claire McFall author. And I am on Instagram too, at Claire McFall author. I am not on TikTok because it scares me, but maybe that could be my professional development. Maybe I could try.
Claire, we cannot be friends if you're not on TikTok. So now we're going to get Claire on TikTok. It's going to be lots of fun. We've got thousands of fans over on my page, and they'll come hang out with you too. We love a good TikTok group, so come join us for all the fun.
Do I have to be funny? I'm scared. Do I have to be funny?
You can be funny, or you can just have fun. You could talk about your books and do all the fun things. We'll chat. Claire and I are real life friends, so we're actually going to hang out and do all the fun TikTok-y things.
Okay.
So keep an eye out.
I commit to TikTok. I will do it.
We did it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you so much, Cam, for being part of this event. Congratulations on Trespassers releasing. And just like KM said, you can get your copies through Mysterious Galaxy. There's a link below if you're watching this live. They'll take you to our website. We still have some signed book plates while supplies last, so make sure you get those. And also get any of KM's available books also on that webpage. Support some wonderful authors and I think, great bookstore. If you're watching this in the future, we'll make sure to have the links in the description below so you can still buy those books. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great evening, and we hope to see you at our next event. Bye!